Hello and welcome to another short tutorial from the Hapless historian for A-level students. This time looking at the 7042/1C the Tudors paper, and this tutorial explores exam techniques in relation to Henry VII and essay questions. Thus the aims of the tutorial are to identify the skills and knowledge to tackle an essay question in the A-level history exam, to illustrate a coherent essay structure to complete the question in the time allotted, and finally to demonstrate how to evidence assessment objective A01 in the exam. To attain ideally a level 5 grade or the next best thing, a level 4 grade in the exam, you need to have a good critical understanding of assessment objective A01. The target states that you must demonstrate, organise and communicate knowledge and understanding to analyse and evaluate the key features related to the period studied, making substantiated judgments and exploring concepts as relevance of cause, consequence, change, continuity, similarity, difference and significance, meaning the ability to analyse the significance of given historical factors. And analyse means to demonstrate critical analysis at A level. Critical analysis at A level is evidenced by identifying and analysing key A01 themes such as cause and consequence, continuity or change, etc. Evaluating by identifying the historical significance of given historical factors. Providing a clear analysis of the issue at the end of each paragraph, identifying the links between socio-economic and political or religious factors, but also spelling out to the examiner that you're clear about the historical significance and not leaving your analysis to the very end of your answer. Providing a judgment on the question with little or any narrative. Often what happens, and this has been referred to in examiner reports for the A-levels in 2018 and 2022, that students often intersperse their knowledge of the subject with quotes from famous historians, or they describe what is going on. Now the trouble with putting quotes in is then students then try to explain what they mean without actually saying what the relevance of the quotation is to the question under review, and as a result their analysis is reduced to mere descriptive, and that's fine if you want a level 3 or 2 or 1. So avoid putting narrative in and avoid describing the issue and concentrate on identifying a judgment as to whether the claims being made about the historical issues are backed up with any evidence from other historical sources. Critical analysis is also evidenced by providing an outstanding answer that will be analytical throughout, identifying the interrelationship between various A01 themes and their historical significance. By providing a critical analysis of each historical factor identified in the question, and an outstanding answer will provide sustained analysis throughout, and an outstanding answer will present a clear, relevant and coherent argument. Ideally, to obtain a level 5 grade, which is between 21 and 25 marks at A level for an essay question, your answer must display a very good understanding of the historical context, identifying and analysing, and this means analysing critically, assessment objective 1 themes. You must evaluate the historical issue thoroughly to provide a well-substantiated judgment on the socio-economic and political context of the issue in question. You must also provide an answer that demonstrates a very good understanding of the historical context, and this can only be achieved by extensive reading of the syllabus texts, including reference books. To achieve the next best thing, a level 4 grade at A level, which is 16 to 20 marks, Your answer must display a good understanding of the historical context, identifying and analysing critically assessment objective 1 themes. It must evaluate the historical issue thoroughly to provide a judgment or supported conclusion on the socio-economic and political context of the issue in question, and it must provide an answer that demonstrates a good understanding of the historical context. Hence the judgment is good but not very good because the student has not read widely enough on a range of historical sources, so there are certain gaps which makes it supported conclusion or a judgment rather than a substantiated judgment. So how do we differentiate between a substantiated judgment, which is more likely to get you a level 5 grade, and a supported conclusion, which is more likely to get you a level 4 grade? On one level, it can be argued that a substantiated judgment equals a level 5 grade and a supported conclusion a level 4 grade, but it's a bit more complicated than that in terms of evidence. A well-substantiated judgment means finishing your answer with a judgment that is well supported with historical evidence and, where relevant, reaches a complex conclusion that reflects a wide variety of historical evidence. One way of reaching a complex conclusion is to present an argument and then a counter-argument. A supported conclusion means finishing your answer with a judgment that is backed up with some accurate historical knowledge of the period, and this usually means that the student has not read widely enough, so they provide some good evidence but not very good evidence, and because of this there are gaps in the arguments. So back to the question. The first thing you do before you write anything down after reading the question and ensuring yourself that you've understood it thoroughly is to find the content words and the process words. The content words are the subject matter, i.e. what the question is all about, and the process words are what you need to do with the question in order to get ideally a level 5 or the next best thing, a level 4 grade. So, in the AQA History June 2021 paper, the first essay question was, by 1509, Henry VII had established his authority across the whole of England. So the subject matter is that by the end of his reign, when he died in 1509, that Henry had established his authority across the whole of England, across the whole country. And the process words require you to assess the validity of this view using the skills identified in terms of critical analysis and evaluation that we have been discussing in this tutorial. When planning to answer and thinking about your structure, think about how much you can write legibly in 40 minutes, allowing that the time allotted is 45 minutes, but remember you're spending 5 minutes to make sure that you have read and understood the question carefully. Now, the beauty of essay questions is, unlike extracts questions, you don't have to do an introductory opening paragraph giving some socio-political and economic context in order to evaluate your sources more accurately. You can go straight into responding to the claim or assertion being made in the question. So your essay question is where you're required to assess the validity of a view, i.e. to present arguments for and against. So this can be divided up into 2 short sections. Section 1, where you present the arguments for the view that by 1509 Henry VII had established his authority across the whole of England, and I would suggest between 1 and 4 paragraphs. Then in section 2, the arguments against the view that by 1509 Henry had established his authority across the whole of England, and those would be paragraphs 5 to 7 or 8 max. Like I say, for most students it's difficult to write legibly no more than 2.5 to 3 sides of A4 in the exam. So in section 1 you write about 1 to 4 paragraphs and present arguments that agree with the claim, And here you do need to have a good critical understanding of A02 because you'll be drawing upon various historians to support these arguments. The establishment of the Privy Chamber or the Privy Council had ensured that Henry controlled government. As Elton 1991 points out, all these men in the Privy Council and Council of Learned in the Law were hand-picked by Henry and owed their position to him. Sir William Stanley was the last noble to challenge Henry's authority, and historians are divided as to whether his words and actions constituted treason, with Elton 1991 referring to the conversation with Clifford as Stanley merely stating that if Warbeck proved to be the young Richard IV, that he would not take up arms against him, while according to Turvey 2010, Stanley had hidden away upwards of £10,000 at his Welsh castle to raise an army for Warbeck. Henry controlled the nobility through a range of inducements, instead of giving them lands and titles, such as elevation to the prestigious Order of the Garter and positions in the Great Council. Henry controlled the nobility through threats, such as bonds and recognizances, which impoverished nobles if they did not keep the peace. For example, the Marquis of Dorset was fined £2,300 for his part in the Lambert-Simnel plot. Attempts to mount a direct challenge to his authority were restricted by acts against illegal retaining, particularly after the introduction of the 1504 Act, which gave Henry the power to decide if a noble's retinue was illegal. The succession of Henry VIII was not challenged, the first unopposed heir since Henry VI. In section 2, which should take you no more than 4 to 7 or at maximum 8 paragraphs, you present arguments that disagree with the claim or the view. So although by 1509 Henry had defeated the pretenders to the throne, others who had legitimate claims were still alive. The Earl of Suffolk, who had a legitimate claim to the throne, was still alive although in prison. His younger brother Richard de la Pole fought for foreign powers in Europe until his death at the Battle of Pavia. Now Pavia occurred in 1525, which was in the reign of Henry VIII. And indeed, Francis I, when they were negotiating in terms of England and France in conflict, pointed out that when Henry was making his claims to the French throne, Francis I said, "I've got in my ranks somebody who is a Yorkist who's got a greater right to the throne than you," which was Richard de la Pole. By 1509, Henry was deeply unpopular. His use of bonds and recognizances had created significant opposition. Henry VIII executed his father's main supporters, Empson and Dudley, to deflect continued opposition, and he disbanded the Council of Learned in the Law and cancelled 75 bonds and recognizances. Henry himself did not feel secure. This was evidenced by his search for a new wife after the death of Elizabeth and his youngest son Edmund in 1503. The localities were still largely in the hands of the nobility, while the gentry in the north had greater allegiance to nobles such as the Percy family than Henry VII. Henry had appointed justices of the peace and sheriffs in the localities who were loyal to him, but their control and effectiveness was patchy. Henry VII had been very adept at establishing his authority throughout England, and it is fair to state that in 1509 his authority was recognised. However, there may have been challenges if he had reigned for longer. He himself was concerned by this. He had ensured that the enforcers of the law and order were loyal to him, but particularly in the north, there were areas where primary loyalty was to the regional noble. And that concludes the short presentation on how to evidence and answer an essay question on Henry VII in the A-level history exam. I hope you found it useful in terms of developing your structure and presenting arguments and counter-arguments and identifying the historical significance, drawing upon the work of Elton and Turvey. If you have found it useful, I hope you will click the like and subscribe button.